Um, Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are we're tackling a stack of notes that honestly feels like it's trying to pull off a magic trick.
It really does. It's quite the journey we're going on today.
Yeah, because we're looking at a source that starts with like the actual physics of the universe,
Yeah.
literally the glue holding atoms together.
Right.
And somehow it manages to land on why you shouldn't get annoyed when the person sitting next to you in a pew sings completely off key.
It is a massive pivot, but we are digging into a sermon titled Christ at the Center. It was delivered by Phillip Gibson in July 2025.
Right.
And you're exactly right. It covers just a massive amount of ground. He's trying to bridge this high concept, almost astrophysics theology with the gritty, everyday reality of community life.
Exactly. And the source material really centers on a specific ancient text, right? Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 28.
Yep, that's the focal point.
But before we get into the heavy theology, and there's definitely some heavy lifting here, we really need to set the scene because Gibson spends a good chunk of time just grounding us in the where and the when.
He does. Context is everything for this text.
So what exactly is the context here? Let's paint the picture for everyone listening.
Well, we are in a prison cell. This is roughly around the year 60 AD, and the Apostle Paul is writing a letter.
From a dungeon, essentially.
Exactly. But here is the fascinating twist that Gibson points out right at the start. Paul is writing to a group of people he has literally never met.
Which is just wild when you think about it. I mean, usually in the ancient world, you wrote to people you knew.
Right.
You didn't just cold call a community with this dense theological treatise.
No, you really didn't. But this church in the city of Colossae, it wasn't founded by Paul. It was actually started by a man named Epaphras.
Okay, Epaphras.
Yeah, Gibson describes him as a co-worker of Paul, like a local leader for that community. And Epaphras basically travels all the way to Rome to visit Paul in prison.
Which I just want to point out is not a short trip in the first century.
No, not at all. It's a massive, dangerous journey. But he goes to give Paul a status report on this church.
And the report card was, it was mixed, right? I mean, the church wasn't burning to the ground, but they definitely had some issues.
Yeah, it was mostly positive, but Epaphras was worried. He basically told Paul that the community was facing cultural pressures.
Right.
And competing spiritual ideas.
Oh.
Gibson really leans into this part. The Colossians were being tempted to basically blend the gospel with other local philosophies.
It's the classic Jesus plus problem.
Exactly. It's what scholars call syncretism.
Like they were trying to hedge their bets.
Totally. The vibe was sort of, okay, Jesus is great for the salvation stuff, but maybe if we add these other strict rules about food.
Or worshiping angels, right?
Yes, worshiping angels or tapping into these secret cosmic philosophies. They thought, if we do all that, we'll be even safer.
It's an insurance policy.
Oh, wow.
You have Jesus, but you also want the premium package just in case things go south.
Precisely. They were treating Jesus as just one ingredient in a big spiritual soup.
Right.
And Paul picks up his pen in this prison cell to basically say, no, you are missing the point entirely. He writes to challenge them to a much deeper devotion.
Arguing that Jesus isn't just a piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. He is the table the puzzle is built on.
I love that. And that brings us to the real focal point of Gibson's sermon. He highlights this specific section of the text that's often called the Christ hymn.
The Christ hymn, yes. It is a beautiful poetic declaration. Gibson actually notes that it is filled with all this ancient imagery from Genesis, Exodus, the Psalms, Proverbs.
It's packed.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to really look at the radical theological claims that Gibson pulls out of this hymn.
Right, specifically this huge idea of the cosmic Christ.
Yes, the cosmic Christ, the restoration of God's image, and finally, and this is where it gets really practical, what all that theology implies for how a modern church structure should actually function today.
Okay, let's unpack this here because it's dense. The opening line that Gibson quotes is simply, Jesus is the image of the invisible God.
Right.
Now, to a modern ear, I feel like that might just sound like a nice poetic title, like a nice thing to put on a greeting card. But Gibson argues this is a highly technical, radical claim.
It is incredibly radical. In the original Greek, the word used there is icon, which is where we get the word icon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it means an exact representation or a map. So Gibson unpacks this by saying Jesus isn't just a moral teacher. He isn't just some wise guy who gives good advice like Socrates or Plato.
It's not just dropping proverbs.
Exactly. He is the visible representation of what God actually looks like.
So the argument is, if you want to know the character of the invisible creator, the actual force behind the Big Bang,
Yeah.
you don't look at a storm or a sunset. You look at Jesus.
Right. He is the visible map of the invisible territory.
Wow.
And this leads directly into the first big theological point Gibson makes, which is about this concept of the image of God and the fall.
All right, going all the way back to Genesis.
Exactly. I think a lot of people know the basic Adam and Eve story, but Gibson connects it directly to why Jesus had to be this specific image.
So let's walk through that. In Genesis, humanity is created in the image of God. But Gibson explains that through the fall, through that original disobedience, that image was distorted.
Distorted, that is the key word there. Notice he doesn't say deleted.
Right, and that distinction matters a lot.
It's absolutely vital. The source actually brings in John Wesley's teaching right here.
Oh yeah, Wesley's perspective.
Yeah, Wesley taught that the image of God in humans includes three main things: our reason, our moral awareness, and our capacity for love.
Okay.
And when sin entered the picture, those things didn't just disappear. We didn't stop being human beings, but they got broken.
So our reason got clouded,
Yes.
our morals got confused, and our capacity for love just became really selfish.
Exactly. Think of it like a mirror that's been dropped and cracked, or a photograph that's been left out in the sun and faded.
It's still a mirror, it still reflects.
But you can't see the reflection clearly anymore. It's fragmented. So for thousands of years, you have all of humanity walking around with this cracked image.
And Gibson's point, the really radical claim here, is that Jesus is the absolute only person since Adam to fully bear and reveal God's image perfectly.
Yes. He is the prototype. He's the complete restoration. Gibson says Jesus restored and perfectly reflected God's likeness.
So he's the uncracked mirror.
That's a great way to put it. And through him, that restoration is actually made available to us.
Right.
The goal of the Christian life, according to the source, isn't just about, getting a ticket into heaven when you die. It's the restoration of that image in us right now, today.
That is a really beautiful way to frame it. It's not about escaping being human. It's about becoming truly human again.
Exactly.
But now let's level up to the term that caught my eye immediately when I was reading the notes. The cosmic Christ. Gibson asked the question explicitly. Why call Jesus cosmic?
This is where the text really breaks your brain a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
Because it expands the scope of who Jesus is way beyond just history. We so often think of Jesus merely as a historical figure, a man who lived in Nazareth, walked around the dirt roads of Galilee, and died in Jerusalem.
Gibson completely affirms that is true. That happened.
He does. But the cosmic Christ concept posits that he is also the divine presence holding the literal universe together.
The source says he gives life and meaning to everything. Like literally everything. Atoms, galaxies, gravity.
Right. It's this massive idea of pre-existence. Gibson really emphasizes the paradox here. He says, think about the human Jesus. This is a guy who fasted in the wilderness. He was tempted.
He ate dinner with sinners.
Right. He wept when his friends died. He bled. He slept because he was tired.
Very human stuff. Very vulnerable, fragile stuff.
Extremely human. But Gibson argues that this exact same person is the entity that existed before the creation of the universe.
So the guy who is hungry and thirsty in the desert is the exact same one who spun the Milky Way into existence.
That is the theological assertion, yes. Gibson is very clear on this. The human Jesus and the divine Christ are not two separate things.
They aren't split.
No, they're completely united. So when you see Jesus healing an outcast or touching someone with leprosy, that isn't just a nice guy doing a favor.
Right.
That is the eternal heart of God, the very force that holds the cosmos together, going on display in a specific physical moment in time.
That really changes the stakes of those Sunday school stories. It implies that the fundamental law of the universe isn't gravity or entropy or power. It's actually sacrificial love.
Exactly. If the architect of the universe is the same person who gets down on his knees and washes his friends' dirty feet, then the grain of reality is service. It's not domination.
Wow.
And that perfectly leads into what Gibson calls the economy of redemption.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that phrase, economy of redemption, because it sounds like we are suddenly talking about finance, but we definitely aren't.
No, not finance in the Wall Street sense at all. In theology, the word economy refers to the way God manages or orders the work of salvation.
Like the household rules of the universe.
Exactly. Gibson argues that both this economy of redemption and ecclesial life, which is really just a fancy way of saying life as a church, derive completely from this cosmic Christ.
There's a quote in the source from David Eng that I just loved. He describes Christ as both the center and the circumference of faith.
It's a brilliant visual. The center is the core, right? The heart of it all. and the circumference is the boundary.
So everything begins and ends with him. There's nothing outside of it.
Right. And Gibson breaks this down into how grace actually functions within this economy. He mentions two specific types of grace that flow from this center: justifying grace and sanctifying grace.
Let's distinguish those for the listener, because I think it's really easy to just lump them all together under the umbrella of grace. What is the difference according to the source?
Well, justifying grace is primarily about position. Gibson describes it as making peace through the blood of the cross. Okay, it's the idea that we are no longer enemies with God, we are welcomed. It's about your status. It's basically getting your foot in the door.
Okay, so that's the moment of acceptance. You're part of the family now. The war is over.
In a sense, yes. That's justifying grace. But then there is sanctifying grace. This is the ongoing daily work.
The heavy lifting.
Exactly. Gibson describes it as the actual transformation that happens over time to help you reflect love in your daily life. It's the long, slow process of fixing that distorted image we talked about earlier.
Oh, I see. So justifying grace is the wedding, and sanctifying grace is the marriage.
That is a perfect analogy, yes. And here is where it gets really interesting for me, based on the text. Gibson says this reconciliation, this fixing of the image, it isn't just for human souls. It's for all things.
Yes, this is the cosmic part coming back into play. It's not just a private transaction.
Not at all. Gibson argues that Christ came to reconcile the entire cosmos. Nature, society, the physical world, everything.
Everything.
He defines harmony not just as me and God are cool now, but as actively loving your neighbor, caring for the physical creation, and pursuing social justice.
So if the cosmic Christ holds the universe together, then salvation has to affect the universe. It can't just be about my personal, private feelings.
Right.
You can't claim to love the Creator and then just trash the creation.
Exactly. It's a completely holistic restoration. But then, just as we get our heads around this massive universe-spanning idea, Gibson zooms all the way back in.
He does.
He quotes this famous phrase from Colossians, "Christ in you, the hope of glory."
This is the pivot from the external to the internal, because it is one thing to believe Christ holds the stars in place out there in space. It's a completely different thing to believe he is actually in you.
Right. Gibson references John Wesley again here, talking about what Wesley called the inward witness of the Spirit.
The inward witness.
Yeah, it's an internal assurance, a deep feeling or a knowing that just says, you are loved. You are actively being made new. Gibson makes a really powerful point about Paul here, too. Because remember, where is Paul right now?
Right. He's in prison. He's in chains. He's possibly facing execution. He's suffering terribly.
So how does he endure that? How does a guy write a letter so full of joy and cosmic supremacy from a dark, damp dungeon?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Gibson argues it wasn't just willpower. Paul wasn't just gritting his teeth. It was the actual presence of this cosmic Christ dwelling within him.
The source says it was this indwelling hope that empowered him.
It's the realization that the cosmic power we just discussed, the power spinning the galaxies, is currently resident within you. Gibson says this is the actual fuel for the hard stuff in life.
Fuel for forgiving someone when you really don't want to.
Exactly. Or serving someone when it's super inconvenient. Keeping your integrity when literally nobody is watching you.
Which brings us to the final and honestly, I think the toughest part of the sermon. The application. Gibson turns his attention to the modern church. And he has some very strong words about how we approach it.
He really does. He challenges the consumer mindset head on. Because we live in a world where absolutely everything is customized to our preferences.
Oh, absolutely.
You order your coffee exactly how you want it. 2 pumps of vanilla, oat milk, extra hot. Your social media feed is completely curated by algorithms to show you only what you already like.
Right. If you don't like a song on Spotify, you just skip it.
Yep.
If you don't like a person online, you block them. You mute them.
Exactly. And Gibson's point is that we bring that exact same consumer mindset into the church.
You really do.
We want the worship music we like, the programs that fit our busy schedules, the people who look and vote and think exactly like us, and if we don't get it, we just leave and go to the church down the street.
But Gibson uses the metaphor of Christ as the head of the church to completely dismantle that way of thinking.
He does.
Because if Christ is the head, then the body doesn't get to just decide what it wants to do based on its own comfort. The head directs the body.
He says, and this is a direct quote, "The church does not exist to fit member preferences." That is a really hard truth to hear in 2026.
It is a hard truth. It pushes back against everything our culture teaches us.
It asserts that the church belongs entirely to Christ. It's not ours to mold into a comfortable country club. And this shifts the dynamic of community entirely.
Oh, so
Well, it means that unity actually matters more than winning an argument. It means we are called to humility and to sacrifice, not just to being comfortable.
he gives a specific example of this in the sermon, referencing a place called Alexander Chapel.
Yes, he points to that specific community as a living witness to this idea. He mentions their long history of missional service, but what really stood out to me was his observation of how they actually treat each other in the pews.
Right.
He calls them beloved siblings and fellow travelers.
Fellow travelers. I really like that phrase. It implies we are all on a journey, we're all walking the same road, and maybe we haven't all arrived yet, we're still figuring it out.
And it implies that we are stuck with each other,
Yeah.
but in a good way. Gibson argues that a community rooted in self-giving love, rather than self-interest, is actually what heals our deepest wounds. That is what unites people across differing beliefs.
Right. So it's not about everyone in the room agreeing on every single political or theological point.
Not at all.
It's about everyone agreeing that they belong to Christ and therefore they belong to each other.
It fundamentally changes why you even show up on a Sunday morning. You don't go to be entertained, you go to be shaped.
Exactly.
And Gibson even suggests that the quote-unquote annoying parts of community are actually features. They aren't bugs.
The friction is the point.
Yes. That friction is where the sanctifying grace we talked about actually happens. That's where the cracked mirror gets polished.
Because it's easy to feel holy when you're just sitting alone in your room praying.
Oh, it's so easy.
But it's incredibly hard to be holy when you're in a tense committee meeting with someone you fundamentally disagree with.
But that struggle is the actual work of being the church.
It really is. So let's quickly recap this journey because we have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. We started with the text itself, Paul sitting in a Roman prison, writing to the church in Colossae, warning them against syncretism, against adding extra stuff to the gospel.
Right, the Jesus plus problem.
And then we looked at the Christ hymn and this mind-bending idea of the cosmic Christ, the one who holds the literal universe together and completely unites the human and the divine.
We talked about the image of God, how it was distorted by the fall, cracked but not deleted, and perfectly restored in Jesus as the ultimate icon.
Yes.
And we discussed the two types of grace flowing from that justifying grace which gets you in the door, and sanctifying grace which cleans you up.
And then we brought it all the way down to the personal level, Christ in you, the hope of glory, and finally out to the communal level. The challenge to stop treating church like a consumer product and start treating it like a physical body where we serve, guided completely by the head, which is Christ.
It really is an incredible movement from the infinite to the intimate. I mean, you have the Christ who existed before time began, spinning galaxies, and then you have the Christ who simply helps you be patient with the person sitting next to you who sings off key.
And that is exactly the tension Gibson leaves us with at the end of the day. It is the challenge of participating in a community that you cannot just mold to your own liking.
You have to serve within it.
Right, because that is where the real growth happens. That is where the image of God actually gets polished and restored by rubbing shoulders with people you might never have chosen to be friends with, but whom Christ has chosen.
It's a powerful perspective shift. Instead of walking into a room and asking, what does this place offer me? You have to ask, how does the cosmic Christ want to use me here?
Precisely. It turns the entire modern consumer model completely upside down.
It does. So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought. We want to leave you with something for you to mull over as you go about your week. It's really a question of scale.
If the cosmic Christ truly holds all things together, atoms, galaxies, human history, and if that exact same force is fully present within you, holding together the scattered, messy parts of your own life, how does that change the way you view your personal chaos?
When you feel like your life is just falling apart, what does it actually mean to believe that the very center of reality is holding you together? Maybe the chaos isn't as out of control as it feels.
That is a deeply comforting thought for a very chaotic world.
It really is. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.